Well, before I start asking our panelists questions about personalization and benefits, I'd like for each of them to introduce themselves, give us a few sentences about who you are and what you do with your company. We're going to start at the end with Emma.
Hi, everybody. My name's Emma Stern. I am the head of global benefits for Bausch and Lomb. I've done benefits my whole career, so just different company that you're figuring out benefits for, but essentially all the same functions, which I'm sure you guys are very familiar with.
Good morning, I'm Alana Kotlyar. I'm the Senior Director of Global Benefits at Equinox. I've been there for 6 years, and I did healthcare consulting at Mercer for 6 years before that.
Stevie Evans from Weight Watchers. Have been in the industry for 19 years, and similar to what Emma mentioned, just sort of problem solving on benefits for different organizations over that span of time. And I focus on global benefits as well as specifically healthcare design and delivery for our population.
I'm Guy Westermeyer. I'm the president and founder of Westcom. We're a communications agency that partners with HR teams to take on the benefit communications. Been in business 24 years, and prior to that, I was in internal communications at Ford Motor Company.
Yeah, and good morning. My name's Megan Burns. I focus on benefits consulting solutions at Benepass. I have been in the health and welfare space for over 10 years, but at Benepass, I focus on supporting different employers' goals when they're thinking about implementing customizable spending accounts like lifestyle spending accounts to support their employees' overall well-being. Yeah.
Welcome to all of you. All right, so our panelists have made careers in benefits in general and in communications. Stevie, you uniquely have focused on wellness benefits for your whole career. Mm-hmm. How have you seen employee expectations of the way their employer cares for their wellness change over the last few years? Maybe we can all put kind of a benchmark in 2020, if you will. What's changed?
Yeah, employees come to expect it. Where previously it was not necessarily expected. Employees also come to us almost like as an educated consumer, understanding the health issues that they're facing, that their colleagues are facing, requesting certain products and services. So I think that's actually a good thing, because it's great when you have that sort of relationship with the employees where they feel involved a little bit in what they're bringing to the table. And of course, we can't always take every employee's preference. We use a lot of data and benchmarking, claims analysis to really select what programs and products we're going to move forward with. But it's definitely sort of a new dynamic that I think has helped employees stay more engaged, and also continue to feel that HR and benefits are a place and a source of trust. So I think it's been good in that way.
You mentioned being an educated consumer. Mm-hmm. How does that compare to just being a subject matter expert on what's available?
Yeah, so for employees specifically. Mm-hmm. So I guess educated consumer in that there's more content on LinkedIn, in whatever other communities, whether it's colleagues, friends, family members, like they're sharing, oh, I'm using this great product for ADHD, adult ADHD, I'm really enjoying it. And then employees will come to us knowing these like specific B2B products that they think they're interested in or would be valuable for their colleagues. So I guess that's specifically how they're coming to us as an educated consumer.
Sounds like we're getting into competitive territory, right? So how are employers using benefits, specifically wellness benefits, to compete? Megan, would you take us there?
Yeah, definitely. So when I think about competitive benefits, or what an employer typically focuses on when they're looking to attract and retain talent, it's both competitive benefits, but also compensation. And so when we think about lifestyle spending accounts, right, the company that I work for today, that type of product actually crosses both areas. Because lifestyle spending accounts are essentially benefit dollars that the employer gets to decide to put into an account, put parameters around them on what the employee can spend on. Most frequently it's around physical wellness, emotional health, family support, and then financial wellness. And then within those parameters, the employee gets to choose how to use those dollars. And so I always like to give that background before answering the question, because as it relates to well-being, being a driver for competitive benefits programs, This type of model really helps support an employee regardless of what their unique needs are. Ultimately, they get to decide how to leverage that program, no matter what stage of life they're in, even as their life evolves. The other layer I always like to mention too, as it relates to competitive benefits, I think it's maybe less talked about, right? Comp and benefits at the forefront, everyone in this room knows that. But also aligning well-being to your company culture, because more and more employees are looking to choose companies or stay at companies that they feel are aligned with their values. And different types of well-being benefits actually show the employer's dedication to that employee so that they feel like their needs are met across work-life balance, burnout prevention, career growth opportunities, and family support. So that's typically how I think about the value of well-being being leveraged competitively by employers.
Emma, Alana, ways that wellness benefits are used, maybe at that critical point of job offer or even for retention. How do you see that being used? Are you having those conversations with recruiting?
I'll go first. Okay. For us, we focus on well-being, and we have such a variable hour population that spans nationally. All different types of employees making different levels of income, that we want to make sure that we're showing up in many different ways. And so what we do is we leverage, I know we all have point solution fatigue, but there's a way to show up meaningfully, and we use kind of like, if an employee is enrolling in any of our healthcare offerings, whatever they may be, we're going to give you this other benefit. And for us, we've leaned into mental health as our well-being piece. Being a fitness company, wellness to us is very different. We don't do a lot of what other employers do because we give everyone a free gym membership, so it's very different. So for us, we're leaning into those meaningful programs around mental health, around how do we help people get to care quicker, supporting that primary care ecosystem. So we have a great partnership with Spring Health, and in that we've continued to invest over the last 6 years because we've seen feedback from the employee survey, but we've seen employees are like, we want more. Like, you've given us free sessions, we actually want more. I'm like, great, I love it. Or we have employees come to us and say, well, to Stevie's point, like, oh, I got on a podcast, they talked about this vendor. And I was like, okay, great, but they don't do B2B business, but we have 2 solutions for you. So like, I think that's where we're leaning in what's important to us, leveraging our current ecosystem as a fitness brand, but also what the employees are asking for.
Yeah. And I think it's been really interesting the last few years. I think we always walk the line with comp and benefits of, I think benefits often we don't want to be the reason to attract and retain talent. We sort of want to be the middle of the road. A lot of the very large companies that I've worked for. And I think that's changed in the last few years as comp restrictions have become harder, right? Just money is more difficult. Businesses are facing headwinds. We've been asked to flex a lot more and be the thing that gets people in the door and keeps people in the door in a way that I think 6 years ago, 7 years ago wasn't the case. So finding the right benefit solutions, really listening to what our participants and what our employees are asking for has just become way more important than it ever was before.
Yeah.
Of course, so many of you know that one of the most difficult parts of benefits is actually educating the workforce on what it is and getting them to use it on a regular basis. Guy, this is your area of expertise. Tell us about some of the more novel ways that benefits leaders are getting the word out, keeping folks engaged over the long term.
Yeah, I think we get this question a lot, and a lot of people come to us looking for what's the newest channel. And the bad news is there's not a newest channel. It's still all the same channels. And last week we were doing focus groups with a university in California. And as we went around the room, this employee wanted it this way, from this channel. Somebody wanted email, somebody wanted mailers, somebody wanted the intranet, somebody wanted Slack, right? So the bad news is we still got to use all the channels we have. I think what we're seeing is the number one thing is leaning into personalization and segmentation. And when I talk about personalization and segmentation, it's looking for those common things, attributes about your employees, and communicating messages in that way. And a perfect example of that is we have a hospital system in Louisiana that has 40,000 employees. They had 40 different benefit groups, and they were relying on a one-size-fits-all communication strategy. So they were telling employees about benefits they weren't eligible for. So instead, we've segmented and now and then added in a layer of personalization. Another big one is really leaning into the term, and I'm sure you've all heard it, moments that matter, and putting your benefits, not making employees have to figure out which vendor does what, but instead saying, what are those common things? Maybe it's family, maybe it's having surgery, and listing all those benefits that relate to that topic in one place. And then the third, I would say, is really multi-channel and leveraging that. And what I mean by that is, if you have a workforce that you can start an email communication, using a platform where you're able to track if they engage, and then if not, after a certain number of times, moving them to print. And then that way you're able to actually measure, did the employee engage? Did they click on the link? And if they don't, if you have the ability, then send it to the home. So those would be like three, like kind of different ways that we're seeing.
I love a rule of three.
Yeah, well, you know.
Yep.
So Emma and Alana, you have a pretty significant chunk of your workforce that's not sitting at a desk all day. So for them, Slack isn't quite as relevant, but the other channels might be. How do you guys manage communications when you've got folks who may not use a desktop computer or a laptop?
So I think similarly, we try to hit them where they are and the way that they ask to be communicated. So we do engage them to find out. But we do a lot of paper. A lot of them have bulletin boards. They have stand-up meetings in the morning with their site leaders. So we get on that agenda. Everything now has a QR code because they're all walking around with smartphones in their pocket, whether they should be or not, on the warehouse floors. So everything now has a QR code. I had an HRBP come up with a genius idea that I've now stolen and I will share with all of you. On all the screens, he made the center sports or news, and then he made a ticker at the bottom of HR news. Mm-hmm. So people were constantly looking at the screens as they walked through the hallways, as they stopped in the break room. He grabbed their attention and then also sort of tricked them into seeing some HR or business news. And he did it for one location. It was so successful, so we copied it along other locations. So we're trying everything. We also are I'm a big believer, and I'm sure you guys already know this, right? To communicate to the home. A lot of times your employee's not the decision maker. So I will do a lot of home mailers. But yeah, there is no silver bullet. So we're trying everything and throwing all our resources at it.
And additionally, on top of all that, we also do top-down approach. So we'll start at the RVP regional level, and we'll work our way down to like a local GM level by market. If there's like annual enrollment, whatever the big comm is, if we're making a big change, we did auto enroll last year. I literally did the whole entire circuit several times, and I was like, our new leader says 7 times 7 ways, and I think it's really meaningful because I was like, the managers need to be the ones that tell the employees. No matter if we send the email, and we're still sending the email, we're still doing the paper comm, someone still needs to physically tell them because they're still going to accuse us of not being told. So we really truly push the message down from the managers and try to hold them accountable in that kind of ecosystem.
Can I add something to communications? We also saw like a lot of success once we implemented Workday 1/1/2021. Took about 2.5 years to do a lot of customization using Extend application, using machine learning within Workday. And that has really been a flywheel for us, that employees can go into Workday, type into the search bar anything about benefits, and everything personalized pops up based on all of their HRIS information. So while Workday can take a lot of customization, it really becomes a very powerful tool, and employees see exactly what they need to see when they need to see it. We can update it instantly. It links directly to sort of tickets where they can ask people in HR or benefits specific questions. And we can basically just drive people to Workday, solves the problem. And I'll also say that Workday launched last year a couple of really good updates, like the Benefits and Pay Hub as one, that really helped continue to clarify for employees what they have access to, what they're paying for premiums, the value that the employer is providing. So kind of finding those wraparound ecosystems, I think, are also just really important.
Curious about the seasonality of something like wellness benefits. And I think, okay, wellness, beginning of the year, everybody wants to reset and commit to, taking care of themselves better, if you will. To what extent do you find that engagement in wellness benefits is seasonal? Stevie, I'm going to come to you, and then Megan, I'd like to hear your point of view. I'm coming to you, of course, because I think a lot of people are thinking about Weight Watchers specifically in January.
Yeah.
What do you do from a wellness perspective to keep folks engaged, not just at the beginning of the year?
I think we actually just follow people's natural sort of interest. So we do a lot of well-being engagement January through May, and then we quiet down during the summer because people are focused on time with their family, vacations, and we might speak to or give information during that time that's very family-oriented, season, summer-oriented, but not ask for high engagement. And then we hit the ground running again September, October, then we're in obviously open enrollment. And then November, December, we focus a lot on just like self-care. And I think the pace of work and personal life gets very intense for people, December and November. So we really focus on like the mental health, the self-care, taking time for yourself. So we kind of follow what I think is the natural pace of life and work.
Megan?
Yeah, well, maybe I can do a quick audience poll really quickly. How many here today are familiar with the lifestyle spending accounts model? Heard that term before, maybe focused on wellness? Okay, perfect. Most hands. So I know I gave some background previously in the last question I responded to. But when you think about wellness and you think about the different pillars you're designing for this lifestyle spending account to address, to Stevie's point, you can also align the engagement strategy to the time of the year, which focuses primarily. So maybe December, January, February, you're primarily focused on physical fitness. It's New Year's, that's what people are really thinking about. Later on in the year, like Stevie mentioned, there's a shift to mental health, family support, or financial wellness. And so oftentimes what employers do, I'm sure your well-being teams each have these different calendars throughout the year regarding the different programs they have that they want to promote, maybe put on screens, news for their employees, so that they can create more engagement. On average at Benepass, we see an average monthly engagement of 85%. And so the way we define engagement is a member's logging into our platform at least once a month and using a portion of their benefit. And so they may not be using 100% of their benefit dollars, but they are using a portion of it to use in a way in which they define wellness. And so when we think about sort of the cyclical nature of engagement for a lifestyle spending account, you're not actually limited to what you may traditionally be because it crosses so many different broad well-being areas. And then maybe the last thing I'll say too is you can design them, you can provide the benefit dollars on a monthly basis, quarterly, semi-annual, annual. Typically, if you do want to have and drive monthly engagement throughout the year, you're going to want to put parameters on it where you're providing those benefit dollars monthly, and then have that communication campaign roll out. Megan, your benefit dollars have hit this month. Please take the opportunity to use them across the different eligible categories you can spend on. You can also enable different communications and reminders if your benefit dollars are set up as use it or lose it too. So there's different types of tactics to increase engagement, but overall, sort of the broad nature of a lifestyle program really employees engage year round.
Guy, what would you add?
I think it's just really kind of, you have to engage at all times throughout the year and just kind of really build out, like you were saying, the rhythms of your organization and what's happening. I really think Stevie hit the nail on the head with the kind of understanding your audience and just being there and showing up on a consistent basis.
Right. Emma, you have quite a global workforce. Tell us about how you're managing communications when you've got cultural differences, language differences, and expectations of, what people want from their employer in terms of wellness.
Yeah, so I think it is really localized, which again, I've worked for a lot of companies that I think don't understand that, right? We sit in the US and we sort of govern from the US. But when you start talking to your local HR teams and really engaging with them in a meaningful way, you learn kind of a much better way to do it. So I think being conscientious of, again, how they communicate. So even as simple as times of day, right? For certain countries, I don't set a meeting after 5 p.m. for them because I know that would be disrespectful to them. So things like that, The benefits can vary greatly depending on what we're doing. So we may globally say, we really are investing in family and the family that you want to build and you want to create, but we recognize that the laws are different across the world. And so what that benefit looks like and how we engage is going to be different. And so that can be same-sex marriage, that can be adoption. We have to show up a little bit differently. Again, trying to be as inclusive as possible and trying to really live those values, but also being aware of the employees. And then I think too, working with local vendors. So, I've come from a school of global EAPs, right? Like an Optum global EAP. That really doesn't work locally. There's a huge language barrier. And if you're already at your emotional stress maximum and you have to now deal with a language barrier or a login that you maybe don't remember. So really localizing some of those benefits, where you can, where it's really high touch employee engagement, and you really need it to be a seamless experience. Finding those local vendors, which can be really hard, ones that communicate, again, if it's a text culture or a WhatsApp culture, making sure that they have all that capability.
Alana, for context for folks, Equinox has a lot of different brands under that umbrella. And so, Alana, you're managing expectations across brands within the Equinox portfolio and then full-time, part-time employees. How do you make sure everybody feels like they're getting a fair shake, they're getting the benefits they deserve?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time listening to our employees, but also we've kind of been through a few rounds. So we'll go back pre-ACA. We used to offer, and this just used to be just fitness clubs, the hourly thresholds were just variable by the job. So as a group fitness instructor, you can't work 30 hours a week. That is almost physically impossible. If you can, kudos to you. You're not in this room. We understand that. And so, before my time, the team really, when ACA came out, everyone went to 30. And there was a lot of employee feedback and feelings around it because it was close to impossible in a lot of these jobs to truly hit those metrics. And so when I joined, we really looked at going kind of, I don't want to say backwards, but going to a different place that made more sense for the business. And so we set thresholds by job. Once we expanded to group and took on additional brands, we actually set it by brand. One of our brands, we've revisited it a few times because during COVID, we were closed. People weren't working, but we weren't taking away benefits. So we've also provided the flexibility to reflect on what's happening in our world when we're setting that threshold. So it varies by job. We do 2 ACA measurement periods, which is very atypical for an employer because we understand the seasonality. We understand working 12 months to gain comprehensive coverage isn't equitable or fair, and our business has ebbs and flows. And we also offer basic medical, nothing glamorous, but it can get a lot of things done with mental health attached to it to all employees at a subsidy. So there's a way that we're allowing employees to have a good, more than MEC, so a good base level of care. So they do feel supported. They have a reason to come into work. If something happens, they can be out of the business and get that care. And as they measure towards a comprehensive plan. We also offer them access to all our voluntary benefits as long as they could pay for it. So it's a different way to show up because I think we understand that, we're also a fitness company. We do need to offer healthcare. And that's been the most meaningful way where employees do seek it out. And sometimes I'm like, someone's fighting to get into the basic plan. And I'm like, I don't know if you understand what you're fighting for, but I understand the value it is for you, right? It may not be the value for us, but we want to make sure that the right people are picking it up. And then the people that are full-time, we've, through our new Ben admin, have started directing them almost, someone called it, we're like a little big brothery. And I'm like, we tried to educate and they're still picking up maybe not the right plan for them. So now we're only offering them as a full-time employee comprehensive benefits. Because we've learned, we can give you options. If we build it, they may not come or they may go in the wrong place and then they get upset. Mm-hmm. So we've started to kind of guide them gently, and I think we've also seen really positive uptick from that as well.
Can I add one more thing to that? When you're communicating with that global workforce, and whether or not you have actually global locations or just you're only in the US, we have global employees. A lot of times I think the default is just to go, okay, well, we'll translate, which is a great first step, but you also have to think about the context of what you're translating. And an example I'll use is we had an employer who had a large Hispanic population who they learned weren't taking medical insurance. They were electing, it's a little bit to what you were saying, they were electing life insurance because they thought that covered their life. Mm-hmm. They thought that covered their medical, basically. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, translation's great, but also taking it, if you're able to, a step further to understanding the nuances and adapting the language. So,
Yeah, this is a very random story I'm going to share with you all, but when I think about insurance, I think of it as its own language. Yeah. And we're all, experts in our chosen field in insurance, but I'm sure all of our friends and family members even call us every October, November, December open enrollment season to get our support with their own benefits plans. And I guarantee that happens to all of us. I had a friend call me recently. English is her first language. I learned she had been electing accident, critical illness, hospital indemnity for years because she assumed they just weren't included in medical, that they were carved out. And so that was sort of a, illuminating moment for me, even as someone who has talked about those benefits in the past because they are valuable. But the company she was at had no education strategy or communication strategy around it. So these employees just make these assumptions. And then when you're layering in different languages, the context is so important. So from the vendor perspective too, not only working with a communications platform, but making sure that the vendor can also have that type of translation services, as well as providing the same benefits that you would for a US workforce globally, so there's parity around maybe in our experience, access to the card, usability, and then currency conversion. So, yeah.
Let's talk about supporting like really acute, critical wellness needs. I think some of you have already talked about EAPs. How do you offer personalization in that? Alana, let's start with you, and then Stevie, I'd like to hear your point of view as well.
So from a personalization perspective, we've really looked at, based on kind of what is our top spend, where our employee needs are, the things that we've kind of tapped into to support our population is based on kind of that need and where we've heard that feedback. So things that we do that I think has gotten a lot of popularity is we have a partnership for virtual physical therapy. And at first when we were doing it, I was like, oh, this may not be received well by our population who kind of is in the space. And when it went out to market, like when we went out to offer to people who were enrolled and they were eligible, we actually had really great uptick. And the feedback we got was actually ironic. And they're like, this is not, it's not allowing us to work multiple body parts at the same time. And I'm like, okay. Like, I appreciate that, great. Like, we gave it to you, you guys really love it. And then it's like, there's that opportunity, but like, there's, that's the pipe dream where we're moving towards to give employees more of what they want, that additional personalization. I want to work on my wrist and my knee at the same time, from a physical therapy perspective. But from additionally, from a personalization perspective, we've really tried to look at when we communicate things showing up and like what is in the moment, kind of what Stevie talked about, the ebbs and flows of the population, but also like we know what's happening in our business and what our employees are coming to us with. And so we've really tried to land from a comms perspective, but also from an offering perspective where employees are asking for something and investing where we can. I think we could all say in this room, everyone has opportunities in their benefit strategy to continue to expand and build, and money isn't given to us. But there's creative ways where we are able to show up and people find it very meaningful. Like adding dependents to certain levels of coverage. And we're like, we don't have many dependents on our plan, but people are grateful we've expanded that in our spring health offering. So we've done small things that I think carry a lot of weight. No one will ever say thank you, but eventually there will be that like one person that truly finds meaning and value behind it.
Stevie?
Yes, my train of thought just left my mind. Okay, so I think that sometimes we don't realize how valuable a broad solution can be, and it's our job as the stewards of the solution and our employees to point out and pull out every thread and mention that to employees through communications. Again, whether we know something's happening in the business, or if it's a certain time of season, or just because we know it's valuable based on data. So I think that there's a lot that solutions can offer. We just really have to pull on those threads. And then I think additionally, the personalization is, again, somewhat of a simple solution where our well-being reimbursement program, we were hesitant, but my background's in population health, so I'm always really looking closely at social determinants of health. And when we look at our hourly workforce, we understand there's some, certain socioeconomic status data points there. And we finally opened up our reimbursement program to groceries. When prior, it was sort of like, well, they should really be using it on a gym or something related to mental health. And 95% of this population uses it on groceries. So, are they buying it on cheese versus, like fresh fruits and vegetables? I don't know, but I don't think it matters at that point. And so I just think some personalization, things like that, like making decisions that really you're looking at what the population needs and what's helpful to them, that's a simple shift. And we found it really valuable for our hourly population.
Before I get to you, Megan, how did you identify that groceries is what you needed to add?
It just seemed, from a social determinant of health perspective for an hourly population, sometimes some of the basic necessities are what goes a long way for people compared to buying the newest sneakers or the newest pair of Lululemon leggings. So we just sort of used the data to make that decision, and it worked well for us.
Yeah, so this kind of ties back to your original question, different types of well-being trends we're seeing in the market this year. And we released our 2025 benchmark and spending trends report. The two most popular categories of spend across our well-being reimbursement or lifestyle spending accounts programs, not only is it physical fitness, but also financial wellness, with the largest category being groceries. Yeah. And that's the largest category this year current employers added to their lifestyle spending accounts. And it's because the feedback they're getting from employees, I think we all know this, the cost of groceries go up, inflation is a stressor, financial wellness is a stressor. And so when I look at that data and I see how meaningful it is, especially when you break it down by different demographics, just completely agree with what Stevie shared about Weight Watchers applying to a lot of companies in our book of business too.
Now, a moment ago, I steered us away from communications, but it would be terrible if I didn't let Guy describe this great way of reframing the 401k participation. Ooh. I thought this was such a creative idea. Maybe people already do this. I had never heard of this before. So you helped a company boost participation in a 401k program. How did you do that? I think this is a good idea.
So it's in the root of it, it's all about behavioral science. And for those that at the most simplest level, we all want to believe that we all make rational decisions and we do pros and cons. But according to behavioral science, we're all emotional beings, and we really actually make a decision based on emotion, and then we rationalize that we were not doing it based on emotion. So with this 401k example, we leaned into loss aversion. Yep. And just as a quick example, if I said, I have a coin and I'm going to flip it, and if it's heads, you get $150. If it's tails, you lose $100. Most likely the loss creates more internal angst, right? So with this 401k, the employer didn't auto-enroll, which many do today, but they didn't, so participation was lower. So we used loss aversion by taking the salary data, and instead of saying, you're leaving 6% on the table, who here speaks in percentages, right? Mm-hmm. None of us really. So instead we said, let's use the data, let's use personalization, salary data, and show them, well, what is 6%? How much money are you losing? Mm-hmm. So we leaned into that. People are twice as likely to avoid loss as they are to the opposite of that. So we leaned into that loss aversion, which then drove a double-digit increase in participation. We also, if you were at 0%, instead of just saying, well, here's what 6%, and here's, you lost $2,000 of company match this year, we did it at 0, we did it at 2, 4, and 6. Because also another behavioral science technique is you want to give people options. Because if you give them options, they're much more likely to actually do something because they feel like they're in charge. So.
Yeah, and I've also heard, not from a benefits perspective. Okay, frankly, it's been on Instagram. I've heard people describe, at my age, mid-30s, neglecting to put maxing out my IRA since I'm independently employed, maxing out my IRA every year. By the time I reach 65, I'm not just losing the $7,000 I think you max out on. I'm losing something like $450,000. And I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna max it out again. That's Instagram for you. Many good things.
The Suze Orman or whatever.
What's that?
I think it's Suze Orman that did that math, and that was a viral TikTok video.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I don't follow Suze Orman, I'm sorry.
Oh, gosh.
Like, like a
It's a
Dave Ramsey
repost.
type person. Yeah. But I think we had a similar problem to what Stevie was talking about, where we realized people can't even invest in their 401k. So we're talking up here about saving in your 401k. Most of our employees didn't have an emergency fund, right? We had a homelessness problem, right? So we had to fix that problem first and start addressing more of their basic needs, which again is maybe a little bit more big brothery than employers I think have been in the past. And so we had to find vendors and educational tools to reach that problem so that we could then have a 401k conversation with them. And that was sort of, a real shift in mentality, particularly when you're pitching to your CPOs, your CFOs, who make $1 million plus, right? Reminding them about this population can sometimes be really important.
I mean, it's what Stevie was talking about, right? Those social determinants of health. Yoga pass is really no good if you're not able to feed yourself and your family on a regular basis without worry. Let's talk about cost savings, if we could. Alana, could you start us off a couple ways that you've been able to find ways to save money on wellness benefits?
Yeah, I think we are, as a strategy, we have been really rigorous about when we go to market, and when our contract is up. And anything that we put in from a well-being perspective, really for me to get it kind of in the door and blessed, it needs to come with an ROI, even if the ROI is 1-to-1. I'm like, it's cost neutral, right? There is no loss to put it in. And so, my position strategically, and it may not be everyone's, is we need to offer healthcare and we need to make sure everyone has access. But it could be curated where we're telling them to go to the highest quality place of care because we vetted them. And just because their friend is a doctor who performs somewhere else, which may not be it could be great quality, I'm not going to dismiss it, but they haven't engaged in what we would deem metrics, right? And who knows what'll happen outside of that one person doing the surgery and the care. So we've really done a lot of work around anything we've put out there to say, like, I'm okay to push you and direct you. Like, we have mandatory COE utilizations required for certain aspects of care under our comprehensive plan. And then we went and we actually partnered with Lantern this past year and said, you either go to the mandatory COE with Aetna, do you, or you can go for free with surgery, or now they're Lantern, with Lantern. So either you go for free or you go to the Aetna Center of Excellence, you can get your care at like just your deductible or nothing, or you can get high quality care, and it could be the same provider. So it's like, if you've done your research, you may see that Dr. John is at both places and you're really gonna pay almost nothing with Lantern. And you're gonna get high quality and a great experience. It's been challenging to get the utilization there, but like my position is that we've built the infrastructure to protect the plan, to save dollars that we can then reinvest elsewhere. And so then we'll put it into like well-being, like mental health and other things. And the one thing on mental health is that we did an ROI analysis with Spring like 3 to 4 years into the contract, because it's like a cost avoidance. It's not really a real ROI. And it actually showed that we actually drove a real ROI, not just getting more less absenteeism, better resilience in the workforce. It truly showed that like we saved dollars because we navigated people to care. There was less escalations. So it really did pay off. Yes, 3 to 4 years down the line, and we pay them a lot of money, but it's one of those things, you built it and people came and they actually asked for it. And so it kind of, if we didn't have it, we would have probably spent 2 to 3 times that in just behavioral health claims. And we had them pre-COVID, so it really did help us kind of with the pandemic and everything that happened.
Anyone else, cost savings, things that you've done recently or even in the past that come to mind? If the answer is no, that's okay.
No, I think the biggest thing has been contract negotiations,
Yeah.
really getting strict about our contracts, and having fees at stake for new vendors. If you want to come in the door, you need to prove yourself with ROI and putting fees at stake.
Yeah. I might add kind of the 1-to-1 ROI. Most of the employers we move to BenePass, oftentimes it's repurposing existing budget in a new way. And so maybe the ROI is 1-to-1, but then we're providing VOI value back to the administrators because they're saving money, being able to focus on other strategic initiatives by having less vendors. And then from an employee perspective, the actual perceived value of these types of flexible accounts is so high. So we can always put together those executive summaries to show what that ROI VOI is, but that's also a big part of my role.
So in the few minutes we have left, I like for everybody to give, 1 or 2 pieces of advice to folks here, how do you get started with benefits personalization? We'll start with Megan, and then we'll go toward the end. So everybody get ready.
Yeah, so really quickly, I guess I would say that, if you've already decided personalization is a goal, you've most likely looked at your current data, your benefits programs, your spend, so you're kind of moving on to the next stage. Two things to think about are what types of wellness vendors have a product that can support personalization, so support employee choice, and what type of technology can they provide you with to serve up that experience of personalization to employees. So I would say maybe starting there, leaning into vendors. I won't steal Guy's thunder because I'm sure he has something to say around comms, but also feel really strongly around creating a really significant launch strategy around personas and personalization.
And thank you. I would say from a segment, like when we talk personalization and segmentation, like I said, is really taking like groups, and sometimes that's the easiest place to start because it doesn't feel too big brother-like, and you're not telling employees data. But like where you can look at where you're able to save money and then develop campaigns around that, that's where I would start, because that's where you're gonna have the most bang for your buck, because if you're able to talk directly to those employees that you know need that message, they're going to respond.
Yep. I would also say, of course, know your population. As a population health professional, that's obviously going to be my first answer. Know your population and what you're looking for. Again, when you think about the segmentation and communications perspective, I feel pretty invincible with Workday Help and Case Solver because I know that employees just have to get to that toolbar and they will receive exactly the information that applies to them based on all the security rules in that profile. And then when I'm thinking about vendors, it's so easy and exciting to want to start conversations with the newest, shiniest, solution out there. I really like to see someone with a couple of years of history, and I like to see some iteration of growth. So some of my favorite vendors in 2012, they started as one thing, and then 2 to 3 years later, you see 2 to 3 to 4 iterations that make sense, that don't they're not just diversifying in a way that they're doing too much that they can't do well, but it has been a logical growth, and those are the vendors that I'm excited to speak with, partner with, and that I know will provide the personalization and the sustainable growth for what's ahead that we might not even be able to anticipate.
I would say I'm not going to say the easiest, but probably the simplest place to start with personalization is in your own current ecosystem. Every vendor you have will show up in some way, shape, or form. It's figuring out what's right for your population instead of going to market and trying to Stevie's point, find the right one, vet them all. You can push your current vendors from a negotiation perspective to do a little bit more, stretch them a little bit. This may be new for them, or hey, they may have been doing it, you just didn't know. Because they've evolved. And I think that's what we try to also do every few years, to be well, how are you now solving this problem? Have you thought about this? If not, great, we'll go to market and we'll figure it out, but do we all want to take on that work just yet? Because then you're also kind of calling it quits on everything you've built, and that's hard. And I think for us, we've leaned on our newest Ben admin for some of that kind of similar to what you talked about with Workday, building out that personalization in those profiles by our populations to serve up some of that information for them and really leverage who's in our ecosystem today. And if we're gonna add somebody else, we wanna be really careful about it so people know where to go and aren't, just not using it at all.
Mm-hmm. Close this out, Emma.
Oh boy, that's a lot of pressure. I thought I was gonna be the anti-personalization person, but it actually kind of aligns with what you guys said. I think a lot of it is solving for the 95% first, and choosing vendors that meet all those needs. So again, you can have a vendor that does multiple things and meets multiple groups' needs, but then you're interacting with one vendor. I'm sure we all know how hard it is to get a vendor in the door through your InfoSec, your data privacy, your legal, right? It's really hard lift at a lot of companies. So getting a really strong partner who's gonna stick around, right? They have the financials, they've proven they're gonna last a few years, and they can meet a bunch of your needs in an impactful way has been, I think, the most successful thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you all so much. This has been wonderful. I really